Okay. So you got to go through my really bad video this morning.
No, it was good.
But that was our best way we can do because my time's not.
It's cute. I like it. I was just annoyed because I couldn't get on, so I was like, ah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But when you were looking at the Shibuya Crossing picture, so what came to mind about your classroom?
Kind of like it's like the center of my world, right? Like center intersection and lots on the go, and kids are kind of going in all sorts of directions. They come from all sorts of directions, and it looked exciting. It looked like there was shopping in some of those stores, so I kind of wanted to like go open them up.
Awesome.
But then at the same time, I'm like, those people should be using the crosswalks because I have a little bit of type A OCD. But I understand that freedom of movement is important and that it's about them, not me.
Awesome.
Probably why I have a headache right now.
It's interesting when you show that picture. I've used it a lot. You sort of get a pulse on a classroom. Because a lot of times if I just say, tell me about your classroom, I hear about that kid or that situation, or so if someone needs to vent, they get that chance.
Right.
Or, you know, they'll just tell you like all the like airy-fairy, like really fabulous things, but they leave out the fact that this is like a real reality.
Right.
And so sometimes when you make another picture, people will talk a little bit differently. And so these we get the like, it's chaos. It's a madhouse. Like kids are never doing things the same, or like I've got kids working all different levels. Like
Right.
you can hear all these different things. It's always kind of funny when you get the pulse.
Funny. But yeah, like to me, that picture is very much like that's a classroom. It's kind of all over the place, and it's okay. It is okay. It's just hard sometimes to keep up, and you want to make sure no one gets hit by a car.
Yes.
Right? Like you just want to make sure everyone does really well and gets across the street.
I love that. Right now, you've done a lot with pedagogical shifts. You're one of our teachers in the school. Looking at sort of the fact that I know you've probably done a lot of these shifts and are doing a lot of these shifts, is there an area where you're thinking, I could go deeper and I could sort of delve into this a little bit more?
Okay. Oops. Sorry, I was going to go on to the next one so I could look at it. Okay. So, like for me, I have a hard time seeing them as individual. I very much see them as like, well, when you start doing one, you kind of are doing them all. And to be honest, like after listening to these interviews, I was like, this kind of confirms what I've always done. I've never been like paper, pencil, sit in rows. I remember my first year, grade 2, every day the grade 2 teacher would come in and say, here's what we're working on today. I'm like, what is all this, right? Like I don't think that way. But like one of the areas I guess that I've been struggling with this year in particular is what do you do? Okay, it's like a vicious cycle. So when my students came to me this year, there was no discipline and there was no structure. And so I felt that it was really important to kind of like really build in that structure. Like I didn't get into activities and inquiry things early because there's a kid who's going to bite, spit, punch, whatever, and I need to kind of keep my eye on him. So I thought, okay, it's important to really set up classroom management routine so that all the kids will understand that we have to work together and it's about all of us kind of doing our best in order to be successful. And then during these interviews, I was like, oh my God, it's time to step off now. It's time to jump in because they're doing it now. And I was like, oh my gosh, Kate, we're 5 months in. I have 5 months left. Because sometimes you're like, oh, it's too late. So anyways, I'm probably rambling. But
no, that's good.
It's time to go now. So it's time to start project-based learning, which is kind of like, I really want to do more project-based learning, but more than that, I really want to take the Reggio philosophy, which I don't know a whole lot about, but like loose parts and creativity, and like this would be a way to show you what I mean. Like I want to have centers that look like this, and I want to have centers that look like, well, I have one. I did this one last year, and the kids love it. They build their own snowman. They have a camera. They take pictures of it. Like, I could deepen that and have them write about it, name it, whatever. I want to have something like this, where they're just learning about magnets, because science is a magnet thing, but they can make different snowmen again,
it's more
taking
of an open
pictures.
Exploration.
Yeah, I guess, and so going more from, I guess, even more from teacher to student, if that, because I want them to be engaged. I struggle though, I guess, like, and then what? Like, so, like, I like to do half an hour every day or every second day of these types of centers where they're, like, I have sensory bins because I want those sensory kids who need a little bit more to have something to choose. And so I have 8 bins, and one might be a puzzle, and one might be sensory, and one is usually a Play-Doh, and one just to kind of spark that creativity and play. And what it's doing and what I'm doing is then paying attention to the collaboration and the communication. And it allows me to listen to how they're speaking and go in, and if they're fighting over something, kind of help them, I guess, model and scaffold to get out of that situation and work together. So I don't. Is that giving you an answer?
It is.
Can you see what I'm trying to
say? I think I can. I'm the trainer now. You're right in saying that we sort of do all of them all the time.
Right.
And that really is good. We should have balance, and it shouldn't be one or nothing.
Right.
What transform allows us to do is we have to remember that any of these shifts are a spectrum.
Right.
So we might have some, new beginning teachers that are here on the spectrum, and maybe you're here.
Right.
But there's still somewhere we can go.
Totally.
Okay?
There's so many places we can go.
And so looking at these particular shifts, as listening to you talk, you're talking about I want to do PBL, but more than that, I want to look at loose parts, creativity, open exploration, redu, inspired, looking at some of those things. Being engaged, and you said creative a few times, I think about 3 times. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm thinking what you're looking at is the difference between student as inquiring creator and project-based learning.
Yeah.
So project-based learning really are these, well, you've done PBL training before, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so that's Buck, that's their recipe.
Yeah.
Project-based learning, there's, many, many, many brands out there of different systems.
Right.
Buck is one of them, one of the most renowned.
Yeah.
But that's where you literally are taking sort of all that teaching and all that learning, and it is all wrapped up in this project, and this project can take long term instead of these individual things.
Right.
Often part of, sorry, I have a touch screen. So
I know, I do the same thing. I'm like, why isn't it working?
One fundamental foundation to project-based learning, this is where people get frustrated because projects get dropped or they get flat or they don't know where they want to go, is that the student hasn't yet learned how to be that inquirer, that creator,
right,
in order to fulfill the requirements of the project-based learning.
And so you're pushing them and pushing them
or dragging them or pulling them or telling them. And so when you can give in, your instinct is huge because when you're looking at half an hour every day these types of centers, and it sounds like you really sort of have this creative thing. What we could look at doing is intentfully building that creator inquirer.
Right.
That's those teachable skills.
Right.
But instead of just an exploration in a guided inquiry, and here's the difference. Often we can do it in, say, an art project, for example, the snowman.
Right.
Really, it's an open exploration of materials and creativity, that's what you want. But now imagine you guys are about to take on this grade 1 thing with coding and robotics.
Right.
Now imagine it's coding and robotics.
Yeah.
Where their open exploration will only take you so far, but then you're going to hit a wall.
Yeah.
Because now you literally have to teach the creative thinking skills, and there has to be some guided inquiry for them to be able to take it further. And that's the teachable moment. You're teaching skills,
right,
not content.
Right. And that's what I need to do,
and
but I don't know how.
And that's what we can look at. And what we do is we build on that. You have that foundation already of inquiry and groupings, and you have so much of this built where it's people who want to go from the workbooks and desks and rows into projects, and you're like, ooh, there's a few steps in between.
Right.
Okay? So
yeah.
You've done these steps. But what you can look at is if you sort of really develop that, PBL is the next natural step.
Right.
Because what happens with PBL is it gets really flat. Kids don't know how to take off with it, and they're like, what? Like, all the kids did the same project, or they just don't know what to do next.
Right.
Because literally we haven't trained that muscle.
Right.
Like, I read a lot of Tony Wagner, and he talks about creativity and innovation, about how we're literally in a world crisis because we're relying on these 2% of autistic savant geniuses,
right,
the Steve Jobs of the world, to graduate and come in and do things for us. But he premises, and I agree with him, that you literally can teach and exercise creativity, and that we need to do it because often our highest and our brightest have had it taught out of them.
Yes.
Because they're completely mark driven.
Totally.
What do I have to do right to get this?
That's right.
Is this enough? How much do I have to
write?
Is this
do
okay?
I need more?
Do I need more?
Yeah.
They don't know because they've literally had the creativity assessed out of them.
Yeah.
And
which is sad.
It's sad. And I notice it especially in junior high.
Right.
Where, I taught low cognitive impaired children.
Yeah.
Okay, the dirt on the bottom of our shoes kids. I taught them for 6 years, and they were amazing.
Yeah, because they can do stuff.
They can, and you have to frame it in a way where they can experience that success. We weren't marks driven because what marks?
Well, you don't have to be marks driven in elementary, which is nice.
It's very qualitative. And then now I in junior high, and I see, holy cow.
Right.
And even the difference between my 7s and 8s, literally huge. Where I'm like, what happened in that year?
To drive it out of them.
To drive it
well,
out of
you
them.
see now what happened.
So,
Who happened?
Right? It's interesting. But what we could look at doing is looking specifically at student as inquirer and creator.
Okay.
Instead of that recipient, because you're right, it's time. Let
Yeah.
them go, let them do these things. But how do we take that beyond just, say, a center or sensory or art?
Right.
And how do you I think you talked about the academic rigor and being able to sort of put in some of those other elements where we can set up something like guided inquiry, where they're learning to be creative inquirers.
Right.
And it's something that fits within your topics.
Okay. Is it boring?
It's not boring.
Okay.
Not at all. And it doesn't have to be. One of the things I focus on very, 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 very much with this, and with anybody I talk to about Transform, it is 100% process driven, not product driven.
Right.
If we never get to the big, fun, shiny project at the
Yeah.
end,
I just mean, is it
doesn't matter.
exciting for me? Like, do you know what I
Is
mean?
it for you?
I don't know. Like, because inquire, I get. Creator, it's tough for me. I'm not creative. Like, I can copy an idea and go crazy with it and then look creative. But, like, I'm not very good at coming up with my own stuff or being, like, do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I get everything that's being told to me. Yeah, I don't know. So, yeah.
Do you feel like your creative muscle needs to be exercised in this as well?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And the nice thing is, too, is we don't have to take on a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
This can literally be, I want to try this.
Right.
And we can move on. Because you are a lead teacher, you get more time.
Right.
So a lot of people are like, okay, I'm going to get this all upon in my half day because that's all I
Yeah,
get.
yeah.
So we can look at something shorter term. Like, I worry sometimes when people pick project-based learning right away because they plan this massive thing and it's going to be all of term 3.
See, and I planned a massive thing last year where literally we overhauled the garden. And it was like, I guess what I want them to do is do more real life things that are really applicable to them. So, like I had shown you, I'm like, I kind of really want science, hot and cold temperature to be more about doing this kind of stuff and being creative and linking it to literacy or to language arts.
Yeah.
And like I want them to create things like, ask the question of how can we garden in the winter? What are some things that we can do? And most of the time they won't be able to answer that question on their own, but if I show pictures, yeah,
But
I do struggle here because you show pictures and then they're like, well, what is that?
They don't, yeah.
Right? And then then they're like, the idea is there.
I mean, you can't get it out of their heads.
Yeah. And like stuff like this, like I want them to be playing with it so that they can tell me, well, what happened? It was frozen. Why was it frozen? Like, I don't know.
It really sounds like a Reggio
Yeah.
thing will work for you. I really feel like it because I can show you a few things. I'm actually going to turn off this stupid thing and then we can keep playing with it. I got it back here. Okay.